starting soon. So just so you know, those of you who are in our meeting earlier, anything that you had put into the chat is not available to people who join late. So that's kind of the way Zoom works. Like so you don't have to worry about any of that information, but if you wanted that people to know in our regular meeting, you'll have to resubmit that, is all I'm saying. So that's good. We are live. It should say meeting is streaming live now on YouTube. And I want to check to see who we have on. I do have Mr. McClellan here, who was the candidate for the 5th. I think there's been a change in that. He will be supporting another. And I don't yet see everybody else, but that's okay. That's all right. I have enough for me to get started with our regular meeting. And I do want to pull this up and share my screen. Just a second. Let's see. Share my document. And so do y'all see my document here? Maybe this is my agenda.
Black screen.
Black screen. I'll just stop share. Sorry. I do have a flag here that I was going to stand and say. I was going to share it with you guys. So we'll just do the pledge, and I'm going to look at my flag that I have on my wall. I guess you could look towards the DC. So can you join me? Everyone rise, please. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under
God,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. So just to give a quick update for those of you who are wondering what's going on with reorganization, Hanover used to all be in the 1st congressional district. It now is going to be in the 1st congressional district and the 5th congressional district. I don't know exactly that dividing line, but if you go on to vpap.org, you should be able to put in your address and it should tell you. But when I call the registrar, she says it's been iffy. So I'm sorry that it's frustrating for some of you, because it's frustrating for us as well. I don't have a full answer for where the cut line is yet. And there's also some things in courts about this. So I apologize that it's still confusing. Just know that it's confusing for all of us, including me, including our registrar and so forth. If you do have questions about where you reside, please feel free to pick up the phone and call me directly, or send an email to me, and I'll do my best to try to assist you. If you've been following the news, you may have noticed that a local teenager and a fellow Democrat and a member of our committee, Ethan Lynn, had sent out a tweet about something concerning the mansion at the governor's mansion, and a staffer or two, I don't know who, sent a vicious attack back at him, and that hit the national news after the Washington Post picked it up, and then CNN had an interview. So I invited Ethan to come and speak to you. He's limited on his time, so I don't know if he can answer questions, but Ethan, if you're still with us, would you like to take the floor and give us a rundown of what happened?
Yes, certainly. And I got to go at 10:30, so I should have time for questions. But so Saturday midday, I had shared a public radio report about some happenings at the governor's mansion. It was corrected, and then within minutes of the correction, I issued my own correction. And then that night, I found out that the team account had attacked me in a tweet and then retweeted it itself. And it was me and former Governor Northam, who Youngkin had made sure to claim, he claimed so much about how he was his best friend and everything. So that was pretty surreal, insane. I went just from a state of shock to just really anger that this even happened, because, minors are off limits from politicians all the time. That's the golden rule. And then Sunday morning, they issued a statement that I'm a Democrat Party official. So that was why. And once they realized that I was a minor, it was removed, even though it says high school senior in my Twitter bio. And then Monday morning, they issued a non-apology, basically not taking credit for it. And I've had a lot of like more Republican reporters ask me, how can you blame Young Kim when it was his team account? And to that I say, the candidate always takes responsibility for the campaign. But I want to, thank everyone here for all their calls, texts, emails of support. It's been pretty crazy and dying down now. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. And I have not received any still communication or apology. And at this point, I don't think I ever will. But if that is the legacy that he wants to leave, so be it.
Anyone has a question for Ethan, feel free to unmute and ask.
Hey,
If
Ethan.
not,
Yeah. This is Ray Grider. Ethan goes to church with me at Ashland Christian Church here on James Street. I wanted to ask you, Rick and I were watching your interview with John Berman on CNN, and I kind of got the feeling through a little bit of that he was trying to do a little bit, or kind of, I don't know. He just seemed like he was kind of digging at you a little bit. One question that really got to me that I'm just really blown out of the water on the whole thing was he was asking about, well, when you turn 18, do you think you're going to be fair game, or do he wanted to know whether you felt like you were fair game because of your connection and because you had dipped your toe into the political realm, and even at an early age, that it didn't matter whether you were a minor or not in some people's views. But I'm just wondering, that's one thing that I think we should be able to go back to the governor and say, look, your actions didn't make a difference whether it was a minor or an adult. Those actions he took were wrong, period, regardless of the person's age. I think it was just, the worst thing about it was, here he is plastering a pic. It's one thing to put a picture of you up and, standing with the governor and kind of make a reference, but then to plaster the picture of Northam and the issues that he had while he was governor that brought up to him, and to try to tie you to that was just ridiculous. And I didn't know whether you wanted to comment on Berman's kind of dig at you, or what is, and the other thing about, not making the distinction between age.
Yeah, it was certainly a curveball. It was that question. I think it was like two questions. Those two questions were not in the pre-interview, which a lot of people found odd. I guess, that's live news. I kind of was like internally panicking. It all just went by really fast. So, I gave my best response that I could.
What was your response? Oh,
I believe it was just that I think, now I have still not watched the full thing since I did it. I think I just talked about how I just, shared a public radio report. I wasn't really attacking him or bullying him. It was just a public radio report.
Well, thank you, Ethan. If you're still around and people have questions, they can ask later. I do want to introduce our guest speaker. We also have our Supervisor Faye Pritchard on the call, who will be open to discussing things going on in our community. But Mr. Warren's been waiting for a while. I do want to introduce him briefly and to give him a chance to speak on things. And then I wanted to also give some time for our Supervisor Pritchard as well. So a resident of Charlottesville, Warren's originally from South Hill. He grew up there. His father was a small business owner, and his mother taught at Parkview Middle School. When he was a child, he liked visiting his grandparents' farm in Mecklenburg County. He used to pull tobacco. He's a graduate from University of Virginia. So he's familiar with the rural area. He currently resides, like I said, in Charlottesville, and he up to this week he was a candidate for the 5th. And I'll let him have the floor to give a brief update, and then we'll go from there. Mr. Warren?
All right. Well, thank you, Daniel. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on, even though I am exiting this race. I'm very glad that I threw my hat in the ring and that I ran a campaign for a couple of months. It's been a great experience. It's gotten me more involved in party politics. It's given me a chance to connect with people and reconnect with people back home in South Hill. So I'm very glad I did it. That said, when Andy Parker joined the race a couple of weeks ago, I no longer felt like I was the best candidate or the right candidate for 2022 for the 5th district. It's a tough district for Democrats. It's a pretty red district. It was before the redrawn map, and it still is. And we need the strongest candidate to face Bob Good in November. And I think that's Andy Parker. I think he's going to put together a strong campaign. I think his experience living in the rural southwestern corner of the district for 25 years is going to be important. I think he has a compelling story, and I think he'll make a strong candidate. However, one of the reasons I got into the race was because I feel like I have ideas to share and I want to participate in the conversation. And I do appreciate you all still giving me a few minutes today to talk about education. I'm going to keep my comments brief. And I know that, right now, clearly we have a lot of very topical, specific issues in education. I'm going to speak more broadly, take a step back and look at things from 30,000 feet and just make 4 brief key points about education, specifically our K through 12 public education, which is something I'm passionate about. The first is that amongst the over 98,000 public schools in America, including over 2,000 public K through 12 schools in Virginia, we have a lot of excellent schools, a lot of excellent teachers and excellent students. Politics, naturally, it's where we come together and talk about the tough issues. So it's naturally where we focus on problems and how to deal with problems. And that makes sense. I think, though, right now, the time we're in, the last 2 to 6 years we've been in America, because we're so polarized, because our politics have become so divisive, and because we've had some really tough issues to deal with, it feels like we're in a feedback loop where it's easy or it's almost difficult to watch cable news or to participate in political discussions and not come away with the feeling of the sky is falling. And the sky is not falling. We have issues to deal with, but we have a lot of great schools out there and a lot of great teachers. I've seen that up close. My mother taught for, her whole career, was a middle school math teacher, worked extremely hard, would, come home in the evenings after dinner and grade papers and do lesson planning. My wife is a teacher in Charlottesville, also extremely dedicated and hardworking. My sister is a teacher outside of Richmond in Chesterfield County. We have lots of great teachers. I have no doubt Dr. McGraw is a wonderful teacher, and we might have others in this Zoom call. So let's not lose sight of that. I think it would be a mistake to lose sight of the success we're having in our schools. That said, we do need to make improvements. And some schools are really struggling. Some school districts are really struggling. And we need to focus on those. As we focus on our schools, I see our public schools as having a dual mission. And there might be more than 2 missions, but I see at least 2 big missions. One, of course, is to educate students, to educate individuals, to prepare them for life, to prepare them for the workforce, to prepare them academically for college, if that's where they're headed. And we certainly, I think, focus on that mission a lot in America. We're a society of individualism. And it comes naturally to us to focus on how individual students are doing, what their test scores are, what the graduation rate is, and those are important things. Also, I see our schools as a place where we learn to be a community. Schools are communities. And as young people, that's where we learn to be a community together, to learn to value people with different strengths, different backgrounds. And I think that's a very important mission of schools that we shouldn't forget about. And I think we should talk about that broad idea more as Democrats. And that's a broad idea, but I think it will open up a path to a lot of our other goals that Republicans are pushing back on right now. I don't think we should shy away from saying, look, schools are more than just a place for individual achievement. They're also a place for community, and we should focus on that. So that's my second point. My third key point is that we should focus on when we want to improve schools, when we try to improve our schools, we should focus on every aspect of our public schools, not just one thing. Every aspect of our schools is worthy of attention and worthy of improvement, from math and reading to sports and extracurricular activities to vocational programs, the quality of the buildings and the architecture of our schools, social programs, everything from homecoming to school prom, the yearbook. School should be a place where students, regardless of their interests or strengths, can find something that they enjoy and that they're good at, and learn that as a society, we need people with different strengths and different backgrounds to be the best community we can be. So we shouldn't overlook any aspect of our public schools. And the fourth point I want to make is about trust. And I think if there's no magic bullet to improving our schools that are struggling. But I think the one thing that will pay the greatest dividends at any school is an effort to build trust. And even though that's not something that's easy to collect data on, even though it sounds a little squishy maybe at first, I think it's a very real and important and tangible thing. And I want to share a story with you that was told to me over 20 years ago that has stuck in my mind about trust in schools and what that means for our school environments and relationships between teachers and parents. And that's an important issue right now, and students. When I was an undergrad at the University of Virginia, I signed up for a program called Adopt a Grandparent, where I was paired with a senior citizen to visit, and in my mind, I was going to keep them company and humor them. In my mind, this was going to be an old white man, and I would visit him once a week, and like I said, listen to his stories and humor him. Well, it turns out I had a very different experience, and it was a wonderful experience. I was paired with a man named Tom Barres, who grew up in Stanton, Virginia, African-American gentleman who had just had an incredible career and amazing life. He was a fascinating, brilliant individual, had been the executive director of the NAACP in Philadelphia. In that capacity, he had been on a radio talk show with Malcolm X. He had worked in the federal government, had traveled all over the country, and had just had an amazing life experience. And we had real meaningful conversations. And he challenged me on all kinds of issues. We talked about politics and race and education and all sorts of things. So one day I was visiting him, and we were talking about education and segregation. And I was trying to make a point about segregated schools. Now, to be clear, Tom Barres was not a proponent of segregated schools, but I was making a point about the harm of segregation. And he stopped me and he said, wait a minute. He said, I would put, and he attended segregated schools back in the 1930s in Stanton. He said, I would put my education up against anyone else's. And he told this story to illustrate why he was so proud of his education. He said, it was not unusual for me to get home from school after playing with other kids, to make my way home from school and to get home and the principal of the school would be sitting at the kitchen table talking to my parents. And one of the points that I came away with from that was the picture it painted was the level of trust that existed between his parents and the administration and faculty of that school. They were a community together. They knew each other well. And when issues arose, if issues arose for Tom as a kid in school, there was trust between his parents and the principal and teachers of that school. And they were all on the same page of looking out for what's best for Tom. That was not a question of who had whose interest in mind. They were on the same page. And I think we're lacking in that in a lot of our public schools. I think we need to find ways of building relationships between parents and teachers with an eye towards building trust. And again, that's a broad thing, but I think it's a very important thing. And I think other things will become other difficult issues will become easier if we can somehow establish trust between parents and teachers and school administrators. And part of that might be carving more time for interactions between parents and teachers. Teachers are very busy and very hardworking. I know there's not a lot of extra time to do anything else, but we need to value relationships between parents and teachers. And I do appreciate your time. I'll be happy to answer questions if there are any, if there's any time. And I do look forward to staying involved in our politics and specifically in the 5th District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren, and I appreciate you coming, and it's so timely. And speaking of time, we try to wrap up at 11 o'clock precisely. So I want to make sure that I have efforts to get everybody on. And today has just been a busy day with so many things going on this week. So I want to hold off questions if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah,
and if you're
course.
willing to stay on, great. Because I want to introduce our supervisor, Faye Pritchard, from the Ashland District. She's been a longtime mayor for the town of Ashland. She's been a resident here and a very involved person in our community, and we adore her. And so I don't want to waste any more efforts on trying to elaborate. I want Faye to have the floor. And Supervisor Pritchard, if you're still with us, can you give us an update on the county and tell us where you are?
I'm right here, Dan. And so first of all, let me say thank you, Mr. Warren. I mean, I can't think of a more important time in Virginia history for Democrats to win, and having the guts to say this might not be my moment makes you somebody I'm going to be watching in the future. So thank you for what you're doing. Dan, I want to talk about a couple things here, and then I really want people to be able to talk to me. I think most of you probably understand that I'm not just upset, I'm furious about our school board's votes on mask optional policies. You may not know how furious I am because it took exactly 5 days before the first of my grandchildren, who was masked, to catch COVID, and an additional 2 days for the second of my grandchildren to catch COVID. As the chair of the State Board of Health, we know that masking works when we all mask. It's not just self-protection. I do want everyone to understand that I had a reasonably good idea of where the vote was going. I did not know our own school board member would vote for that. And those of you who know me can just kind of guess about the language I used later that night. But we can talk about that. That vote caught me as off guard as it caught all of you, I think. I'm not exactly sure where we go from here on masking. Except to say, send your children to school, taking as many precautions as they possibly can. And my grandchildren both got COVID but they were both fully vaccinated. So vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate is the mission. We are still losing people in our community because of COVID. I also wanted, just before we open for people to, I know a lot of people have questions about this. I want to throw out a piece of good news, something that I'm very, very happy about. We have for a long time been concerned about our communities of color and the ways in which those communities can be preserved and cared for. And Brown Grove in particular is in a development path. It has been since probably the 60s, certainly the 70s, with development going up day by day and industrial stuff planned. And ever since Wegmans, I think the Brown Grove community, in ways I've never seen before, has really come together to say, no, we are a historic community and we want to be taken care of. And this week, working with some of the residents from the Brown Grove Preservation Society, we put together a new plan, and I could not be more excited about this. It's time for Brown Grove to stop having to be reactionary. We take them a plan and do you like it? We take them another plan and do you like it? Instead of that, as part of our ongoing comprehensive plan update, we're putting together a Brown Grove working group, and Brown Grove's going to say what they want to look like. They're going to decide the future of their community. They're going to decide where things go and where things don't go. And that will be a permanent part of the comprehensive plan. And I think the Brown Grove community is excited about it. I'm excited about it. I share Brown Grove as my district and the Beaver Dam district share Brown Grove, and our temporary supervisor, if you will, Alan Davidson, is really excited about this as well. And we hope to have our first meeting set up before the middle of March. So I'm going to stop there, Dan. Those are the big key things, but I'm open to anything anybody wants to ask, at least for the next 10 minutes.
All right, guys, feel free to unmute. And thank you, Ms. Pritchard, for giving us time. But guys, feel free to unmute and ask your direct questions to our supervisor while we have her. And it seems like she's probably between meetings right now in the car going from one meeting to the next.
I am. But this is really important to me because I know we've all had a lot of shocks this week. And oh my God, I didn't even mention maybe the biggest thing is the uproar at our meeting on Wednesday night over banned books. Let me just say this about that. No. The book in question, I actually ordered off of Amazon during our meeting. It's already at my house. I've already read it. I think the answer to books that parents find objectionable for their children is read books with your children. You look at the books, but because you find a book objectionable does not mean that you have the right to find it objectionable for everyone in the community. That's not your call. And sometimes we have to be politic, and sometimes we have to go to the mat. And I'm going to the mat on this one. My friends know that my 2 New Year's resolutions this year were to be more organized and to be more brave. And this might be my first really big opportunity to be brave, but hell no, we're not banning books. Okay, sorry.
Hey, Dan, I'd like to follow up on that if I might. Hey, Faye, it's Jamie. So in regards to that, it seems like in that instance, and then in another instance that took place earlier in the school year, there seems to be some circumventing of the actual process for reviewing materials at the schools. And I don't know if I know you're on the board of supervisors, but I don't know if you could talk a little bit about what you might or might not know about that process and how we can make sure that the school division is following that process rather than allowing school board members or board of supervisors members just to go into libraries and take books out on their own.
Right, and that is not okay. And I do know a little bit about it. I know a little bit about it because of this. I know a little bit more about it because Julie Tate, who used to be the Hanover County librarian, she retired just a couple of years ago, is my neighbor 2 houses down and in my book club. So we've talked about this a lot of times long before this ever came up. Books, anytime any book is selected for a school library, it is reviewed by not just one person, but a committee of people. There are all kinds of factors that are considered, like age appropriateness, reviews of the book from other educators, other educational groups. But if a parent or a school board member or anybody else finds a book objectionable, there's a process, and that process requires the person who finds the book objectionable to ask for it to be reviewed. It is reviewed by a committee, and it is ultimately reviewed by the Hanover County librarian. So it's not a one-stop shop. And I will tell you, there is a book that through the process of review was pulled off the shelf this year. It was reviewed and found not acceptable. It's a book called Lawn Boy, which is a graphic novel I'm currently in the process of reading. Every time a book has been brought up this year, I've bought the book. The other one, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the other one. And I might be wrong. Lawn Boy is not a graphic novel. The other book is called Queer Something, and it is a graphic novel. And I'm in the process of reading those. I don't have a part in that process, but I always make sure that I read them so that when there's a question, I actually know what I'm talking about. The book that caused quite the stir this week is not objectionable. I can see why it's worthy of conversation, but again, there's a process to be followed, and the people who make these decisions are trained in what's appropriate for children and in general and by grade level. I know that's maybe not as specific as you wanted, Jamie, but there's a real specific process.
Yep. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'll let others ask their questions. Thanks.
Hey, if I can jump in on that, on the article that was in the paper, it was indicated that they were going to, in the retreat in March, review that. What can we be doing in addition to writing and speaking out about making sure that the process is fair to everyone and not that a school board member or a board of supervisor can ask for a book to be pulled and it's pulled, or they say it's pulled?
I think the thing that you can most effectively do, because I'm trying really hard not to be jaded here, but it does seem to me that our school board listens selectively, and they don't like controversy. And I think some members have been more fair than others about these issues about books, but I think presenting them with as much concrete evidence as you can, show them articles that come from journals that talk about how books should be selected, appeal to people like Bob Hunley, who doesn't always vote in a way I would like, but does, it seems to me, listen to some of these more objective things. Continue, write 1,000 letters, overwhelm them with the numbers of us who believe something different than this kind of crazy talk. The other thing I'll say is make it clear that you, as a person who, as a parent, or as a citizen of our county, you don't believe that every book is correct for every child. What you believe in is a process where educators look at that and where parents interact and help make decisions for their children. Nobody's going to make a child read a book out of a library that a parent finds objectionable, but nobody should be able to say what your child can read if you think it's appropriate. By the way, I do want to say a big thank you to the folks who came to our meeting the other night to speak out about banning books. Two of those three people were from the Ashland district, and I'm really grateful for it. The other thing, I guess, is maybe, we're the Ashland district, so they know we're the liberals. I think sometimes it's really helpful to get other voices from other districts into this conversation if you know people who can speak out.
Hey, Faye, this is
Yeah.
Ashley. I mean, I feel like this goes without saying, but I mean, maybe it's Hanover is known for we have some good quality education here. I graduated from Hanover. I think a lot of people on this call did. I think this goes without saying, and I know this comes around like every 30 or 40 years. The point I'm trying to make, and I don't even know if it's a question, is that they didn't need to ban any books when I was there 18 years ago. And so why, there really isn't a good reason for it now. And I don't, it's just political, but is anybody is anybody saying this is affecting my child's education, or are they just saying, I don't want them to read it because it's liberal?
Well, I will tell you that I can only speak about this third hand because I wasn't there. But according to the supervisor from that district, this particular book that we're talking about now the problem was brought forward by a parent who thought that the book was anti-police. It is not. And who thought that the book promoted or exposed their child to violence, which it did not.
I see. Well, I read beloved and many challenging books as a high schooler at Patrick Henry, and they weren't always my favorite thing to read. Sometimes it's hard to read difficult things, but we all survive. So maybe they can also survive.
Couldn't agree more. I'm going to take one more. Please, I also encourage you, please text me, call me. Dan and Jamie have my number. I want to talk to every person who wants to talk about this, but just call me. I can take one more question and then I'm going to have to roll to the next thing.
And Caroline?
Yes, I don't have a question, but I did just put a link on the chat scroll for an article that was published in the Mechanicsville Local that is about something that is impacting the Brown Grove community. And I would encourage everybody to read the article and understand just one of the things that's going on there that is a threat to the community. So please read the
Caroline,
article.
are you talking about the land? Are you talking about the landfill?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just say about that. I have not seen that letter to the editor. They've talked to me about it, but please understand that the folks in Brown Grove aren't opposed to that landfill, and that is not a one and done situation. That is far more complex than some of the arguments I'm hearing. So I would love to come talk just about that. But it is not as straightforward as this is a threat to that community. And certainly the overwhelming majority of Brown Grove citizens have not said that to me. In fact, have said the opposite to me. So I know that normally when we think landfill, like who could think landfill is a good thing? But this is filling in an already open pit with construction only material with land that would afterwards be deeded over to Brown Grove as an amenity. The man who runs this has been deeply involved with that community for many years, and just saying, It's not, I'm not,
I'm only suggesting that the article be read.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm just saying, I haven't read the article. All I'm suggesting is talk to the folks in Brown Grove as well, because it's not a one-sided issue. I'm trying as best I can to hear what the folks in Brown Grove are asking me for. And I just want to be very careful about this one because I think it's complex.
Thank you, Faye. I appreciate you. I know you have to run off to another meeting, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Caroline, call me. I'll be home this evening.
I'm going to ask somebody else
and everybody
to call
else
you.
who wants to.
I'm going to ask somebody else to call you.
Okay. Anybody can call me. Okay. All right. Bye, you guys. Thank you.
Right, so Miss.
All right. I know that there's still more questions and so forth, but I want to get the meeting wrapping up. We will end the live feed at 11 where we normally conclude. And if people want to stay on and ask more organic questions, if you're open, I'll stay. I want to move to Jamie Durant, Jamie, to give us the school board of supervisor update. You've already heard it, but it is his prerogative to give us the updates each month. So, Jamie, the floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we talked about, I guess, the biggest item that took place this week at the Board of Supervisors meeting. Additionally, I do want to make sure everybody's aware that the school board is attempting to update the prioritization for who can speak during public comment time. The way that they've proposed the changes to the prioritization leaves a lot of folks disappointed in where they have teachers and staff prioritized, as well as students. So they've decided they didn't vote on Tuesday. They moved the vote to next month. So if it's your prerogative, please contact your school board member or all the school board members and ask that they work to prioritize staff and students on the public comment time, especially over local business owners, I guess, is one that they were put behind. So, and happy to answer any questions or comments, but I don't want to take too much time because I know Faye spoke to most of the big issue this past week.
Well, thank you, Jamie. If someone does have a question, just put it in the chat if we missed you and you wanted to speak. And if you still have a question at the end, I think we'll have some time. I do want to move on with the rest of the meeting just to get all of that done. Women's coffee, I believe that we have Tony speaking on behalf of the women's group. Maybe I'm mistaken. Or maybe Tony, yes, you got, if you can, there you go.
Sorry, I was not unmuted. Anyway, Diane asked me to speak because she's out of town visiting her children and grandchildren. And I just wanted to say the women's coffee at this point in time is being planned for the end of the month. She doesn't have an exact date yet because she's trying to get a speaker. And we're hoping that if the spike continues to crash as it has been in Virginia, that we will actually be able to meet in person among those members who are vaccinated. So anyway, you'll be getting a notice from Diane in a little while, in a few days, on when the coffee will be held. But I think we're all excited that we probably will be meeting in person. And as you know, those women's coffees are very popular. So we hope to see you once we make the announcement of when it is. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, we don't segregate ourselves, but we like to meet periodically. And if we met with everybody, it would become a Hanover meeting. Yeah. And so that's why we have women's coffees, we have men's forums, we have Black caucuses, but that doesn't mean you can't go, right, Tony? Right? If somebody has a great speaker and you're like, hey, I want to be there, then call. Let them know you want to come. And okay. So I'm just saying, but it's not like we can have these meetings. It's not that we're segregating, is what I'm saying. We're not segregating ourselves. We're just trying to meet. So, and the
Well,
women's coffees are very
in-
popular.
In response to that, I will say that the women's coffees are unique because they are, I've been to the men's coffees, lovely events, lovely. The women really are there forming lifetime friendships. So yeah,
Yes.
it is different.
It is, yeah, it is different. I agree. Thank you. So I want to call off the new members that I saw that had applied to be part of our, to re-up, if you will. If you haven't done so already, guys, please send in your application to join our committee again. You're always welcome to our meetings, but that small $30 donation lasts for 2 years, and it keeps us running. It keeps our committee running, and so it's very important. So if you have friends, family members that haven't re-upped, please encourage them to do so. But I'm going to call off these names, and then I'm going to ask for a motion to accept them. And then it looks like we're going to have about 10 minutes that we can ask questions of people. So if Mr. McClellan's still on, if Jamie's still on, if people want to ask of those. So let me read off these new members. Patty Cotillan, Brenda Coleman, Terry Diebold, Larry Diebold, Jane Flowers, David Gibson, Sarah Gibson, Joe O'Connor, C. Reeves Preety, Rita Ricks, Mark Sproul, Stacy Sproul, Carol Tarkington, Louise Street, Ola Hawkins, Thomas Hicks, John Hodges, Sandy Hodges, Alexander Jones, Nancy Cackley, Sherry Claver, Nancy Patterson, Maggie Shapiro, Murphy Sprinkle, Woody Sprinkle, Catherine Wittig. Is there a motion to accept those new members?
So moved. So
Is there a
moved.
second? Thank you. I got a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Ashley.
Second.
Any discussion or not? All right. Well, we can't discuss. It's too big of a group. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, like sign? All right. Welcome our new members. Well, they're re-upped members, but thank you guys, and please do so. We now have 10 minutes, so I was scared we were going to run overtime, but it looks like we were under time. And so it's great. If Mr. McClellan, if you're still on and people want to ask questions about your view on education, I heard from one person at least that said, hey, wait a second, how do we as parents how do we as Democrats let teachers and parents know that they can trust us, or something to that effect? So if you have a point on that, Mr. Warren, that would be great. Or if the person who asked it wants to unmute and ask that question again, so it's clearer for me.
Hey,
Sure.
that was me that was asking the question. This is Ray.
Okay.
Yes, I would like Warren to address that, and I thank everybody for the comments that you put in addressing that question. But I think this gets back to this whole thing that's come up within the meeting today about the books, and I mean, let's be honest. This is fear mongering. This is nothing but plain long fear mongering and dog whistle tactics for people that, I mean, we're in a very tough time. We all know that, but this was happening before the pandemic as well. And it's classic dog whistle type stuff to get people riled up. But that being said, how do we conduct, Warren, how do we conduct ourselves as Democrats and give people an understanding that they can trust us? Because the trust is the important part of building, as you told in your story, building those relationships. If we can get people to understand who we are and that we're not the boogeyman, that we're not lizard people, and somehow figure our way into letting them understand who we are as people, concerned parents, concerned policymakers. How do we do that? And how, in your experience, being more connected to the rural community down in South Hill, which I was born in South Hill. How have you experienced that, and how would you suggest as Democrats that we engage with people that are willing to listen to us,
but have these susceptibilities to these fears?
Mhm. Well, it's a great question, Ray. First, specifically about the book banning issue. These folks on the extreme right, or wherever they fall, I think book banning it's a mistake. It's wrong. I think we all agree with that. And I think it's a losing issue for Republicans or for these Republican supporters, leaning people. I think that's the pendulum swinging way too far to the right. And I think that a majority of people, I could be wrong on this, but I feel like a majority of people in America, even the 5th District, even Republican leaning people know better, that book banning is a bad idea. I think it's justifiably, it has a very negative connotation. I think it's anti-American, really. And I think that's a losing issue for Republicans. And certainly we need to talk about it. Think as Democrats, we need to talk about it, think about it, push back on it, and explain why it's a bad idea, and talk about and say the same things that have been said in this meeting about book banning. But I think that's a losing issue for Republicans. But to directly answer your question about how do we engage with rural voters, first I would say that your supervisor who spoke, I thought she spoke very well, and she made the point of there are times that we need to be politic and there are times that we need to go to the mat, and I agree with that. I think when we go to the mat, we should be careful about focusing too much on the Donald Trumps and the Glenn Youngkins, and certainly there are times we need to go to the mat and speak out against what they're saying because it's wrong. But let's not get too distracted on attacking the crazies in the Republican Party. Let's not get too distracted with attacking, the outspoken crazies in the Republican Party, because when we do that, I think we risk ignoring the persuadable people in the district that we can speak to. I think we need to sometimes, at a point, let's forget about Donald Trump, Bob Good, Glenn Youngkin, whoever, at a point, and focus more on talking to the people who are persuadable, who might lean Republican but could vote for a Democrat. And the first step is to listen to what they're saying, which is what I was doing in my campaign. I want to continue to do, to talk to people back in South Hill who are Republican-leaning voters, or people in Hanover County who are Republican-leaning voters. And as Democrats, we rightly focus on empathy for marginalized groups, for African Americans, for members of our LGBTQ plus community, and those are the people who have been disadvantaged by the majority group in America. And I speak as a member of majority groups. But we can have empathy for individuals in marginalized groups. And remember that regardless of whether we're in a minority group or a majority group, we're all individuals, and everyone is worthy of empathy, of getting empathy from other people. And so we don't have to forget about having empathy with members of majority groups, with our, white, rural Americans. Our society is going through a lot of change right now, and it's a good thing. But it's easier if you are a member of a majority group and you've got a college degree, you've traveled the world, you read the Washington Post, New York Times, New Yorker, whatever. It's more difficult if you have a less broad view, and I don't mean to look down on anyone, but when Fox News plays video of George Washington statue coming down, and all of a sudden we're not celebrating certain holidays and things are changing, that's hard for people in rural communities. Those things make up a big part of what they love about America. So I don't know if that's a direct answer or not, but I think we let's listen to people, let's focus on the persuadable voters, and let's remember that it's okay to have empathy for every individual, regardless of what group of people they fall into.
That's a good answer. I'm going to have to cut us off just for a moment because I want to end at 11 and still stay on the call. So I know people want to still talk, and that's great. I do want to publicly just say just a few words before I ask for a motion to adjourn, and then I'm glad to go offline and follow up on what I'm getting ready to say. So I heard a school board member say that because of our taxpayers, we have schools, and without taxpayers, teachers would not educate. And that's not true, because I educate people all of the time. I volunteer my time to educate people around this entire county. I've done it for my entire life. I remember teaching people when I was just a teenager, trying to help other people learn things. So to suggest that because of money or because somebody has a bigger plot of land, that their voice matters more than the educational system is harmful, to say the least. And it's also quite disrespectful to the entire education establishment. And I want to end with, if people want to make decisions based on who votes, then they should be elected. They should not be appointed. People who are appointed make decisions based on their appointment, not on the people who vote. So that's where I want to end. That's my right as a chair to say it. And so I'm happy to go offline and talk more about it, but you're welcome to share that publicly because it is still public. And so before we end, is there a motion to adjourn? And then I'll close.
So move.
So moved.